All right, everyone, welcome to the Colored by Felix podcast. I have Sebastian and Andrea next to me here, and an amazing guest artist. His name is Nuge, and thank you for being here. And we're excited to get to know you. And yeah, we just talk art.
Awesome.
Yeah,
And
thanks for
before we
having me.
get
I
started,
appreciate it.
sorry, I didn't interrupt you. Before we get started, I just want you to shout out your Instagram handle or anywhere else that people can find your art so they could follow along.
Yeah, my Instagram is Nuge and Wood, and Nuge is spelled Nuge. And the only other social media that I have is TikTok. It's NVGE. That's it.
Awesome.
Awesome. So I found you on Instagram on Discovery. Like I just saw you. I think an art feature page shared your work, and I was like, well, this is very interesting. I've never seen something like that before. So it was the one I saw was obviously they're all kind of similar, but in a different the way you create them, like the colors you use and all that stuff. But you use wood, you carve it out, you cut. The whole process is entertaining how you do it, and then you the like just the design of the with the wood blocks, and then you paint on top. It's like you're creating you're making your own canvas from scratch to finish, like the whole process, which caught my eye, and I just loved the colors you use and the design. It's very interesting. And I just wanted to ask you, like, is that something you've done? When did you discover that? Like, when did you start that? Caught that style? Like, how did you learn to do that?
So my professional journey began around 6 years ago, and honestly, I never thought that I would be creating art. I was in a creative field, but I didn't think that I would be making something strictly creative and be making a living out of it. So my background is actually in architecture, and like architecture school was absolutely amazing. It was heavily design based. It was fun. I was designing pig farms in the sky, like anything goes. But then when I was working as an architectural designer at a couple of different firms, one in San Francisco and then the second one in San Diego, like it was like not like school at all. Like I was sitting at a computer like putting together construction documents every single day. And the most designing that I ever got to do was rearranging condo layouts for different buildings. And I think for me, this was like the turning point where I just needed like a creative outlet. So I found a wood shop, joined, realized that I didn't know how to use any of the machines. So I took a like weekend long course to make cutting boards, and like that was that. Like I made cutting boards, and the entire process was like so extremely gratifying for me because I felt ownership for the first time, like from conception through production to the final product. Like it belonged to me, which I didn't feel in architecture. So for like the next year and a half after work every day, I would run to the wood shop, make cutting boards, and that was that. But then I got laid off from my job in architecture, which was what gave me permission to really chase this dream of making art. So that was about almost 6 years ago.
Wow.
That's so cool. I mean, I just had so many questions as you were talking there because I think that's such a fascinating story. I think like the first thing that I think is so cool is that it all starts with a cutting board, because I mean, I've seen your work too. And the first impression, especially for somebody like me, I'm not much of a materials oriented person or like, with physical stuff like that. My first impression was just like, oh my gosh, this is impossible. How does this person do it? Like this, clearly they're born with it, but it's like so cool to hear that you didn't even know how to use a machine. You just started with a cutting board. And I think that's like, for anyone out there, that is super inspiring because it's like, hey, if you're willing to put in the work and you're passionate enough, you can do something amazing that's never been
Oh
done
yeah,
before.
it's been an insane process because like when I first stepped foot into a wood shop, I didn't even know how to use a drill because there's different numbers on the drill that tell you like the speed and like the torque it has, and like I didn't even know what those numbers meant. Like that's how little I was like oriented with like construction and like being around wood. And like the environment that I started in was absolutely perfect because it was like it was a shared space. Like you basically pay a monthly fee and then you have free reign over all of the equipment. But then there's like a lot of other members. And since like I had no experience with any of the material, like there was a bunch of guys who were like just making furniture and whatnot. And they were like super knowledgeable and letting me know like, okay, so this is what this machine does, and that's what that machine does. And so like that's basically how I got my start. Like I was just bugging people left and right, like asking like stupid questions.
That's so cool. And then what is it about, like, what is it from either your upbringing or like something you learned along the way that gave you that mentality of like, hey, I'm just going to jump into this, you know, versus saying, because I think a lot of people might be in a similar circumstance, say, you know, encounter all the drills, for example, and say, oh my gosh, this is too complicated, I give up. Like, what was it that made you just keep going and say, hey, I'm going to learn whatever I need to learn?
So I knew that I liked working with my hands because of architecture school. Like in like, but before, okay, so to pedal back a little bit, before architecture school, I did 3 semesters of pre-med, and that was fucking terrible. Like my dad's a doctor, and he was like, my entire life, he was like, you should become a doctor. Like you should be a doctor. I don't know, typical like Asian stereotype, but like he was like, you should become a doctor. You should give back to society, help people. Like that's why we're here. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna be a doctor. And he was like, what doctor are you gonna be? I'm like, plastic surgeon, just because like that one's gonna make a lot of money. So
And yeah, giving back to society, like you said, what are rich women in LA going to do without plastic?
yeah, I might as well benefit from it, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, gonna be a plastic surgeon. And then I did 3 semesters of pre-med. And honestly, it was like the worst time of my life. Like I didn't understand science. Like it just didn't click with my head at all. So I was trying really hard. I was still getting like C's, and I had to talk with my advisor at the time, and it was almost like a coming out story. I'm like, I don't think I'm meant for science. Like like tears were cried, and it was like it was a weird time. But that, with having that under my belt and transitioning into architecture, it made me realize that like I really loved design, and I didn't know that I had this inside me before. So going into architecture, it was extremely fun. And like from the first semester, I was doing like 3 all-nighters a week, and it was because like it wasn't I didn't have to. It was just because like I felt really passionate about design and the art that I was involved in. So like I was doing these all-nighters trying to perfect my designs. Like, and like for me there was a competitive aspect too. Like I wanted my stuff to be like the best in the class and stuff like that. So I would spend all this time, and part of the architectural course was making physical models, and I would spend more time on physical models than anyone else. Like I would, like, my record was spending like 2.5 weeks on one model. And I was doing all-nighters the entire time. Like I was taking naps in between classes during the day, but at night I would stay up all night. So
Wow.
so that's how I knew that I liked working with my hands. So when I was in architecture working for the firms, um my creative outlet, I was like, what do I do? Like I need to feel alive again. And so that's when I was like, okay, I'm going to join a wood shop. I'm going to make furniture or something like that, but it's going to be with my hands.
So you always knew, I guess like what I was wondering is how did you know like woodworking right away? Like, and yeah, I don't know. That was curious to me.
So I don't know why, but I've, in my head, when I was like debating about like what I could do just to like feel the creative juice again, I was like, okay, I'm either gonna paint or I'm gonna join a wood shop and make like high-end furniture. I don't know why it was those two options, but like painting always had its allure to me. Like it seemed like it was very calming. You could just sit in your room and paint and just like block the world out. Or I could join a wood shop and make things with my hands. And I decided to join the wood shop because of architecture school, because like all of the time that I spent making those like little models, I just knew that like work with my hands is something that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And how did you discover that, like that technique, that style where you cut up pieces and put them together? Was this somewhere where you saw maybe from an artist or something similar that you were inspired by, or that completely just came to you over practice and, accidentally? Like, was it, how did that happen?
So the very first carvings that I made, they're fabric inspired, and I was definitely inspired by like the artists that I saw on like Instagram and like in like various like social media outlets. But like, so when I first but I transitioned from like cutting boards to coffee tables to countertops to clocks, and then finally I got to art pieces. And when I wanted to make my first art piece, I was actually really stuck. I was like, I think one of the hardest things is like not knowing what to make before you start a process. So I was like stuck in my head. I was like, okay, like I want to make an art piece, but what do I make? So I was like, okay, like most sculptors, they make people, like, but then I had so many questions. I was like, should I make a man or a woman? And what are they doing? Like, what are their expressions? Are they young or old? Like, how should it feel? And then like I had so many questions that I was like, okay, I'm gonna boil it down. Like, what essence do I want to like invoke with this? And so I was like, okay, like I want it to feel calming. I want it to feel like you're at home when you're with this piece. So I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna make a piece inspired by fabric, like bed sheets, like you're in bed and these sheets are just surrounding you. So my carving, I referenced an actual sheet, and I wanted to capture that calm feeling and put it on a wall. And I had no idea that this was gonna like inspire like an entire evolution of pieces following that. But I made that, and then for me, like every single piece has like a different feel because I put my soul into every single piece. And like for me, every piece feels different, but I think to the outside perspective, like someone could be like, oh, like every single piece kind of looks the same. They're all like sheets, but in different ways. So like I like being on social media and everything, I did get in my head because of some comments people left. And I actually took like some negative comments and like spun it in the right way, because like people would say like, oh, it's like it's the same shit. Like, what's the point? But then I kind of took that to heart. I was like, okay, they're kind of right. Like to me, it's all different, but to them, it all kinds of looks like the same thing, like over and over. So I took the bed sheet foundation that I created, and I decided to like deconstruct it further. So how I got to like the multi-component pieces is from taking, like, you can actually see this a little bit, it's a little too dark, but like
Oh
this
yeah.
piece behind me, like I took like the peaks and the valleys of the fabric carvings that I made, and I deconstructed it into, like, I cut it into little pieces where they're individual components put together. And then from that's how I started making my sculptures with like all the small pieces and stuff.
That's beautiful. Wow, that's really cool to hear that.
Mhm.
I'm always interested in how, yeah, an artist finds their way, or inspiration, their path, because there's always a path, always a discovery, and it's usually you're inspired by simple things in a way. It's usually starts with a simple thing, and then you grow from that. But so you said you were into you, so you're working with wood now. And you said you've been messing around with paint, right? And whenever, how, like, you were always painting, or so how did you get those two styles together? How did you get an idea like, oh, I'm gonna now add some paint to it?
um i've I always wanted to add paint to my pieces, and that's actually like I feel like it's a hot debate, just like going off of what people say when I share my projects online and stuff. But like, it really seems like a lot of people hate that I put paint on my pieces, but then there's the other group where the other people, they absolutely think that like the paint brings my works to life.
I agree
Now,
and
is the first group like carpentry purists who like think that good carpentry has to just sit on its own? Like, what's the mentality there?
oh yeah, absolutely. I do think that the people who think that paint does not go with wood, they're like absolute purists. Like they're like, wood is beautiful, it's on its own. And I do agree that they're like, wood is beautiful on its own, but I also think that like adding paint to the mix just like brings it to like a whole nother level. And I don't think that it's like it should be applied to every single application, but for the uses that I've had it with, I think it's absolutely amazing. But I'm also really careful that when I use paint, that you can still tell that the pieces that I use it on, that it's still wood. That if you're standing across from the piece in a room, that you can still tell that, oh, like there's like the grain texture. So that's why I use ash wood, because it has like a really porous grain where like if I dye it black or if I put paint on it, then you can still tell that it's wood. I mean,
Mhm.
while like if you couldn't tell that it's wood, then I might as well use plastic or some other material.
Mhm. And the paint you use, is it spray paint or what kind of?
So the paints that I use are urethane paint. It's an automotive paint, but
Oh,
but before I got to paint, I was messing around with like the chameleon pearls, which people also use for automotives and stuff.
Yeah, I was actually going to say like that was the first thing that really struck me about your work was the sheen that it
Mhm.
has to it. It's got this really unique finish. And like, I don't know if there's anyone out there doing something like you're doing, but because I haven't really checked out specifically wood-based work, but like I've honestly never seen anything like those textures that you're able to create. And it's something to me that's like, it's super surreal. I feel like sometimes art can take us to this really like elevated magical place where you're like, whoa, that is like something right out of fantasy, you know? And so like for me, I love those moments. And I feel like even with the bed sheet, what you were saying, it's like that totally like inspired me because I was thinking about just the way that, you know, a bed sheet is almost this random pattern, right? If you were to just throw down a bed sheet, but then it's like you're taking that randomness and you're like examining it by like cutting out these pieces and like I don't know. It's really cool. It's almost like this sounds so nerdy, but it's almost like you're like acknowledging the weird like mathematics of the universe and physics and everything through your work, you know?
And also going off of the bed sheets, I do think that like what's interesting about the bed sheets is that it is random and it is fabric and it can be beautiful on its own, but at the same time it has like a history to it. Because like if you go to anyone's bed and look at their sheets, it almost like tells a story. Like is it calm or was there like some like aggressive history that happened there or something like
Yeah.
that? So
Or did they not wash them for a year?
yeah, yeah, it kind of tells you like a little history about the person that used it, you know. So
yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's
like
cool.
I think there's like an infinity of stories that can be told with bed sheets, but at the same time, like I said, like it can be boring and like very repetitive if I do only bed sheets. And that's the reason why I kind of evolved, because like to the outside perspective, it could look very mundane if that's all I did.
Mhm. Now, so when you were like, finding out your style and kind of getting like inspired and creating and getting your a little bit closer to more of what you're doing now, did you have social media platforms then, or somebody recommended, or and how did that like were you already posting, or you did it like recently, opened a page, or because I know I like I follow a lot of art featuring pages and I see a lot of work, but yours recently started coming up, and I'm like, wow, why, like never seen anything like this. And I've seen woodwork. I have some friends that actually would also took classes, and they always say this, they start working on furniture, couches, tables, and things like that. But so I've seen some cool work with wood, but I wanted to know, like, how did you get into when did you start your social media?
So with the social media, it's kind of funny. Like I never it like this all started with like as a hobby with cutting boards, and I actually never thought that I would be making money from this, let alone like make an entire like career path from this. So when I first started, when I was making my cutting boards, I was sharing it on Facebook, and then I was asking my friends, like, like, do you think it's even worth sharing on Instagram? Because for me, like, social media, I feel like takes a lot of effort just to keep updating people, and then like to document the process, and like it just took a lot of bandwidth out of me, because like the joy that I have from creating is just like get in the studio, make shit, and that's that. But like to document the process and then to present it nicely on social media, like took effort. So at the time, all I was doing was putting on Facebook, and Facebook was not even like a business page or anything. It was just for my friends. So I was asking my friends, like, do you think I should share this on Instagram? And they're like, yeah, share it on Instagram. I was like, yeah, but then if I share it on Instagram, should I continue sharing on Facebook? And like, they're like, the more people that you can share your work with, the better. Like, you can start making money from this. And I took that to heart. So I started sharing on Instagram, and that's where like new faces outside of my friends groups started seeing my work, and I was like, this is amazing. It's kind of like having a mini art gallery in your in your pocket that you can curate, and like you can kind of stay on people's radar like all the time. So I think like right after my cutting board journey started, I started sharing my stuff on Instagram, and that's when it started snowballing, and I just stopped sharing my work on Facebook, because um my friends on Facebook aren't going to buy my art pieces. So
I feel you. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so like when most of the people who well, first of all, is this your full-time career now?
yeah, this is my full-time career. I just added my second assistant like 4 weeks ago.
Oh, nice. So
Yeah.
that's something that I always ask just for our audience, because a good chunk of our audience is people who, see themselves maybe having an art career one day. And so like, when did you know that it was time to transition? Like, how did you kind of make that move?
So like I mentioned, like when I got laid off from my job in architecture, that was like the turning point for like my entire life.
Okay, so that was it, because sorry, I didn't understand the first time you said it. So it was when you got laid off, you didn't go get another job. You're like, okay, I'm all in right now.
Um, Basically, but I mean, there's a little bit more to it, because when I first got laid off, I was like, fuck, like I just invested all of this time, money, energy into architecture school, because I also have my master's in architecture. So like a total of like 6.5 years. And I was like, I can't just drop all of that and just start making art, because like I paid good money for this stuff. So when I got laid off, like I had a conversation with my mom, and I was like, yeah, I just got laid off. She's like, oh no. But I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna take a little time off, just recalibrate, like stop to smell the flowers, and just like get my energy back, and then I'll go back to architecture, don't worry. So I was gonna get 6 months of unemployment, so that was gonna be like kind of my leg up to kind of like not be too desperate. And for me, I was like, okay, I just told my mom 6 months I'll go back into architecture. So for me, that was like, okay, I have 6 months to prove that I can make enough money that I can survive without money from having like quote unquote a regular job. So 6 months came and went, and I wouldn't say that I was making like amazing money or anything, but I was making enough money to survive, and the money that I had from unemployment, and like that was enough for me to keep going with this journey. And at that point, like I really had no plan B. Like all of my eggs were in one basket. Like I wanted to make this art career happened just because I had experienced how it felt working for another person and how gratifying it felt working for myself, creating my own stuff, that I was like, okay, this is it. There's no turning back. And yeah, that was it.
So do you have like a time reference, like whether it's your age or like the year when that was?
I'm 34 now, so just under 6 years ago I got laid off. So whatever that math turns out.
Okay.
28, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Ish, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Cool. So yeah, like Felix was 27 when he started his art career. So if you guys are young, get started now. Doesn't matter your age.
And I
Yeah,
think
definitely.
like I think that's the tough part too, is just like kind of getting caught up with like the age thing, and like seeing, like, you're always comparing yourself to another person, like, oh my god, like that person got into their first gallery at 22 or whatever. And
Mhm.
like I think that mentality is extremely defeating, because like no matter what you accomplish, there's always going to be another person that accomplished that at a younger age or something like that. So
So
I
true.
think that like whatever age you accomplish anything at, that's amazing, because you accomplished it, you did it. And
Mhm.
one of like the bigger things for me is getting started at all, because I never would have gotten to this point if I didn't make cutting boards. But like I never had this journey in my head. So if right from the get-go, if I had it in my head like, oh, I want to be a professional artist and make this for a living, I never would have made cutting boards.
Hmm.
And if I never made cutting boards, then I never would have gotten to where I am. So it's extremely
Right.
important that you just like enjoy the journey, you get busy and make something. And while you're making that, like whatever you're making, you're gonna come up with an idea for a better piece in the process. So that's like my one thing.
Yeah, that's so true. That's really good advice.
So when you started selling, did you start selling more through, I don't know if you're in a gallery or through mainly social media?
I was selling strictly through social media. My friends stopped purchasing from me after I stopped making cutting boards, because that was like cutting boards is an okay price range if you're a friend and want to like
Right.
support. But
Mhm.
like anything above the price of a cutting board, it's like, oh, that's too much. So so after cutting boards, like I was relying like solely on social media. And it was actually in 2020 that I got into my first gallery. And like I think it was a culmination of like different factors that helped me out. Like one, like my work got to a better place aesthetically, like it evolved a lot. And then two, COVID happened. And I think like with COVID, a lot of people like had time to kill. They were doing home projects. They wanted to maybe put like nice artwork in their home. So like I got business. I think I got business from that. And then also on top of that, I got into my first gallery locally in San Diego. And then it was crazy. Like from that one gallery, I don't know if it had anything to do with that, but it spiraled and I got three more galleries out of that. So
Wow.
yeah, I'm working with gallery here in San Diego, Miami, Whistler, British Columbia, and Singapore.
And how's your experience with working with galleries?
They've been great. They add a lot of credibility to my work, and just like it's very validating, because for me, like I 100% had like the imposter syndrome, just because I have no formal training in this industry. So I always felt like I'm just making shit up. And I'm like, wow, I'm just like making this up. Like I just made this up and people are buying it.
Mhm.
So I felt like it like in a way I felt like I was just a fraud, because I'm just some random guy that makes things and people buy it because I made them think that it looks good or something. And and
It's like funny
like
when you say it out loud.
It is. It's actually terrible. Maybe I shouldn't have said it. But
No, it's
but
good.
then like the galleries supporting my work, it kind of made me feel like, oh, like these people are professionals and they deal with artwork for a living. And if they're saying it good, they're saying it's good, then like maybe it is legitimate. Like maybe it's not so bad after all. So like having the galleries helps me out a lot. They've added a lot of credibility to my name. And um I mean it's also tough. Like I think galleries get a lot of flack just because they're the gatekeepers of the art world, and they can make or break artists sometimes. But I don't know, my experience with them has been really good.
So are you still getting sales directly through like social media? Like how would you say the balance is with the galleries and like sales that you deal with directly?
I would say that at the moment 60% of my sales are directly like through my studio, like probably through social media funneling it in, and then the 40% is through galleries just promoting my name to like their list of clientele. But I also want to say some of the people that like come across my social media and then they're not able to find like a way to buy it, because like if you go to my website it doesn't say like, oh, like purchase this piece here, just because like that's just not how it's done. It's just better if people like send an email or something and facilitate it that way. But since if you go to my website, it doesn't say buy here. So a lot of people sometimes they see the galleries that I'm associated with, they'll go to the gallery instead and then like start a commission that way, which is also great because a commission happens. But at the same time, when you go to a gallery, they take 50%.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's a double-edged sword, but at the same time, like the galleries have like shown so much support that when it does happen, like I think to myself, like, you know what, like these galleries have supported me, so like throwing them like 50% of a commission, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Now
they
I want
earned
to
it.
address a point before we move past it. You were talking about imposter syndrome, and I think that this is like a really valuable thing to maybe expand on for like the people listening. Like, if I may be so bold, I want to offer my thoughts on it, because I think that like, so it reminded me of like, there's like my favorite comedian is Bobby Lee. Have you heard of him?
Mhm.
From like, Mad TV and from a few movies and stuff over the years, but he's mainly like a stand-up comic, right? And he's an amazing talent, and his work in Hollywood doesn't reflect that. Like, he's barely gotten any roles, but he's this like, everyone in the comedy community like respects him as one of like the kind of elder statesmen of comedy that who's currently working. He's like 50 or something. But anyway, I listen to his podcast and it's hilarious. I listen to it once a week, and it's so funny because every once in a while, like you'll hear him, because he came up in the days when, it was just gatekeepers, right? Like in Hollywood. And that's all you had. You didn't have social media and stuff, but using social media, him and his girlfriend and their crew have built their podcast into one of the top podcasts in the world, right? The guy's probably making money hand over foot every month, tons of listeners, fans always shouting his name on the street, blah, blah, every potential mark of success. And yet, up until recently, when he started getting bigger roles in movies, you would hear him on the podcast kind of complaining about how, the industry never cared and all that stuff, right? And a lot of that was due to like, racial prejudice and stuff back in the, the 90s and the early 2000s. But it's like, to see somebody who's so clearly, for me, at least from the outside, to see somebody who had built this giant thing that's clearly a success, that clearly everybody loves, still doubting himself and still having this imposter syndrome, it really hammered home for me, because it made me realize that as artists, we all have that. Like, I think we really do, except the people who are just like so confident. I'm sure there's a few of those out there who are just, born confident. But like for the rest of us, I think there's always that imposter syndrome of like, until the people at the very top validate me, I'm not gonna really truly believe it, But like, and I'm not saying I don't want me to speak for you or anything, but I'm speaking to like any artists out there listening, is like, I looked at Nuge's work, and it's so very obvious to me that this is a talented artist who's working at the top of his field, right? But to hear you saying, oh yeah, I still have these doubts, and then all of that, like, it's just, again, kind of hammers it home for me. Oh, even all these artists that I, look at their work and I'm amazed by, like, they can still experience that. So it's like, I think for any of you out there who are maybe not as far along on your journey and you're having those same thoughts, like, is this really who I am? Is this what I'm meant to do? Does anyone care? Blah, blah, blah. Just know that people way further along than you on this path are experiencing those same emotions,
Mhm.
Anyway, that
Well,
was, I just wanted to give that little rant.
Well, I think like feeling like an imposter is almost like normal in a way when you're kind of like making your own path in any career fields, because like say like if I was to stick with architecture, like you go into an architecture office, you put in X amount of hours, and you finally have enough hours accrued so you can take the architectural registration exams, and it's like you follow a hierarchy, and like it almost goes for like any career field. Like if you're a doctor, you graduate medical school, you do your residency, or you become a lawyer and you take your bar exam. So there's like a hierarchy, there's a path, but when you create your own path and it starts working and people are giving you money for something that you kind of made the path up, it's almost like is this real? Like why, like people are believing me for something that I just kind of made up. So like without a system already in place telling you how this is supposed to operate,
Right.
it feels very weird that it actually worked, you know?
Yeah, totally. And what I also noticed is that a lot of the artists, they we're all creating something in our own, but I like in our own way. But I noticed that we focused on a specific thing, and we go into a little bit more detail than, like a person that is not creating, we're not. So like we go into it a little more, and I feel like that's maybe part of why we think we're not maybe worthy, or like, oh, because we overthink, maybe like, oh, this is, like because we go deeper into our thought, and maybe deeper into thinking that this isn't maybe good as good, and so that also, it's not a bad thing, because it makes us challenges to step out and actually make something even better, and grow as a creator.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. So maybe, yeah, like maybe you don't want to be the opposite either, which is like so certain of yourself that you
Yeah.
are ignoring your ability to improve or whatever.
Mhm.
No, I definitely think that like being self-aware and like being nervous in your field keeps you on your toes.
Mhm.
And taking criticism to heart, for like, I mean, it's case by case, but I do think that like the criticism that I received, like it pushed me to further myself better, and like that also pushed me to adopt a mindset that like every last piece that you make is your best piece. So for me, like my that being my general rule of thumb, it's always pushed me to like evolve and be out of my comfort zone with every piece that I make.
And what kind of keeps you from taking it personally, if you like, because I think that is a pretty, advanced mindset to have, when you can look at a criticism and say, huh, that's valid, without taking it personally. Like, how did you kind of get to that place where you're able to separate people who are just being haters versus maybe a valid criticism that can help you?
Mhm.
I do think that sometimes, like, I mean, a lot of the times, because like it's so easy to be anonymous online and just like say whatever you want. But I do think that people who say things in passing and them being haters, it's also a valid form of criticism. Like
Mm.
sometimes like your first instinct when you see something is what people say online, and I think like your first instinct of anything or a piece of art is absolutely how people feel about your work. So I think that when I see like haters saying anything, like I actually take it to heart. Like I go through like different forms of like this process though. Like at first I'm like, wow, what an asshole, like this guy sucks. And then like maybe like a few days later, I'm like, you know what, they're kind of right. Like my work is becoming kind of redundant. And then like from that, like I let it like seep into my mind. And then like a few months later, I'm making a piece that evolves from like the past like stage, just because like someone said something. And I mean, like I'm not gonna react to like every single comment, but like some comments from certain haters, they I don't know, resonate a little more. And it's probably because it came from a place where maybe I knew it myself, but I didn't want to deal with it yet. So
Mhm.
hearing someone else say it kind of makes it become real.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But I notice it seems like you're taking it more in a positive way, you know, like
Yeah.
you're taking it more and you're not, instead of, you know, quitting or giving up, you're taking it and you're you know, turning it around and making it into a positive way how you can improve that. So
Yeah.
I
it's
mean, it's kind of like a super philosophical way to say it, but like life is basically like how you react to things. Because like so many things are going to happen to you, good and bad, like you can't avoid it. But however, how you react to things and evolve from the things that happen to you or the criticism that you receive, like it changes everything. So like I
Mm.
guess I choose to take good and bad criticism, and I try to better myself from it. Because also from like an artist standpoint, I think that like I totally agree with what some of my haters have said, is that like you know, your stuff looks redundant. And I think making the same thing over and over in different ways is also the death of an artist, because it stops becoming exciting. But it's also like a really hard cycle to get out of, because when an artist, for me, I feel like when you find your bread and butter and you're making money from it,
Mhm.
it's easy to fall into that cycle of like, oh, like this works, I need to make more of this. But then
Mhm.
like once you make more of that, it's like it doesn't feel exclusive, it doesn't feel like it's exploring anything anymore. So it's a like easy trap to fall into.
Yeah, I feel like
Yes.
it's all about balance. Like that's something that we've even noticed with like Felix, because like he, like we've talked about before, like he started doing landscapes, but he did them so much that then it started to feel redundant, like you said. And then it's like you have to find this balance, because then it's like people want to box you into something, but then you also want to be exploring as a creative. So it's all about that balance, I guess, right?
Definitely.
Yeah, like I think like as an artist, you have like the license to be selfish. Like if you want to explore, you should explore. Like you should do something that still excites you. And I think that when you make something that excites yourself, like that energy can be felt in your work, and other people will want it too.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's this, I feel like, well, I'm, you know, like happy to hear that, because exactly what you said. Like I was trapped in this system where it's like the same thing, and it was working, I knew it was working, you know. And
Mhm.
but I was like already getting drained, and I feel like I wasn't challenging myself and not stepping out, you know. And so it was really hard to get out of that, really hard. Like and I'm still like working to push myself to slowly get out of that, you know. And because I want to grow. I'm still young, you know, growing, learning. I don't even know what style, what's going to happen, you know, like in the future. But I'm excited to that's the point, is it's exciting to not know what's going to happen in the future, or where your art is going to lead. Because if I know I'm going to create a landscape painting in 10 years, I feel like right now I'd be like, okay, I'm done. It's boring, you know, that'd be boring. So I wanted to ask you actually, so watching your videos, like they're very entertaining. And I wanted to ask you, do you record everything yourself, or you have people helping you, or how do you do that?
So everything is edited by myself. But I have my assistant who be like, whenever we're in the studio, like we have like our headgear on and our earmuffs for ear protection. And so it's like we've gotten to a point where my assistant is so used to asking me to take videos that like I don't take the headgear off. I just do this motion with my hands, like take a picture, take a picture. And like
Nice.
he just comes over, whips his phone out and just like takes a video, and I'm like, I give the thumbs up and that's good. Like it's like it's not a very planned out process, but at the same time, like I keep track of like how my videos are taken in a chronological order so that I can later edit them to make a storyline.
Mhm.
But like I feel like with social media, like you can't have stuff that's like overly edited, because like if you have like a slow intro or something that with your logo coming in like drifting into the frame or something like that, then like you've already lost your audience, because it's like social media is like it happens so fast, and
Yeah.
like everyone has ADD. So like if the first 2 seconds are not entertaining, then like you're already done.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we're actually about out of time here, but I wanted to just close it out with our typical segment, which is just ask an artist. And we just ask for questions from Felix's audience and just have Felix and the guest give their best answer. And so this one is from Sangeetha, and she asks, how do you like, what's your planning process when you're going into a new work?
So I mean, I have like different types of pieces, but I'll talk about the foundation of my work, the fabric pieces. So for my fabric inspired pieces, I actually push around a piece of actual fabric on a board, and when I get like the form that I like, I'll tack it in place and glue it in place. And like I think very much to how some of the painters operate is that like they reference photographs for their paintings, right? So for me, I reference a piece of fabric that's been glued to a board, and like I go back and forth, but obviously it's not going to be 100% a copy of that fabric. It's just to get like an overall flow for the piece. And um for me, that like I make a lot of tweaks along the process, but like that keeps a track of like the overall flow for me.
Okay, so you don't like sketch, right? Like, or
Some for some pieces I do sketch. It's just that's just one of the processes. So like yeah, like some of the processes where it's like multi-component, I do sketch. And sometimes I'm not able to achieve like the overall flow that I want with an actual piece of fabric. I'll just draw it on paper, and then like to transfer that from paper to like a blank canvas like panel of wood, like I'll sketch like a grid onto the piece of paper, and then I'll bring the grid over to the panel, and that's how I figure out like where the peaks and the valleys go.
That's cool. That's in a way like that's similar. Like, but what I do is I take a bunch of like just to have a reference. I remember when I first started painting, like getting into painting, I thought I needed to copy exactly the same color. I used to actually, when I have an image, print an image, I would mix my color and like touch with my brush on the sky or the whatever the color that was, and I tried to copy it exactly that the color, and that was so exhausting. I almost gave up on painting. I thought that was too much work, and so I was like, no, there's got to be an easier way. So then I just eventually I just kind of started, as long as I can get the blues, shades of blues, it doesn't have to look exactly like the image. And then I started letting go of those rules or whatever that was in my head, and then like it freeing, kind of letting it naturally come to life, and that was a lot more fun, so I kept doing it. So now what I do is take a bunch of, if I'm going off of a reference, I'll take a bunch of images that I'm inspired by. If there's like a certain thing I notice, I'm like, oh, I'm going to take that and place it into this image, and take this image and place it here, and I just do like multiple images sometimes and combine everything together. And then also like I don't really copy exactly like it. I just kind of take an idea and kind of go and change it up, still play with it. And I think that makes it a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, I also think that that's what makes it like yours, right? Like the edits that you decided to keep in or omit, that's what makes the piece yours. And like it's almost what you see of the world, and this is the world that you created.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, like if everyone was just doing photorealism, it'd be a pretty boring place. I mean, even photographers have to choose what to include in the frame or what angle to shoot it from, and how to
Mhm.
light
Yeah,
it and all
absolutely.
that stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah.
people want a point of view. They don't want to just see the world as it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and once you let go, start letting go of those rules in that, in your head that comes and tries to box you in, it actually becomes a lot more fun, right? To create, and you feel free and you want to explore, and it just gives you motivation. Actually, in a way, it pushes you to come back to the canvas and create. Sometimes people are like, I can't find inspiration. Well, maybe because there's too much rules in the head, and you're seeing too much, planning too much, and it's blocking that creativity that wants to come out of you.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you also, so like, just like as a final question, is there anything you wanted to say to the listeners, any kind of encouragement or tips, anything that you learned along the way in your art journey?
So I think I already mentioned it, but like I think the biggest struggle for anyone who wants to do anything creative is not knowing what to make. And it's happened to myself as well. It's like I got stuck in that process where I was like, okay, I want to make something, but I don't know what to make. So like that's when I was like stuck in my head thinking like, okay, man or woman, old or young, what are their expressions, blah blah blah. And I think like the same could be said for like painters. Sometimes like you want to paint, but like you don't know what to paint. And I think that like the first step is the hardest part. To put the brush down on a canvas is the hardest part. So like just choose something, just anything, just get your hands busy, make something. And like during the process, like you're gonna come up with better ideas, but the most important part is to get your feet wet, and from there, like something better will come from it.
Mhm.
That's good.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today for the Color by Felix podcast. We were honored to talk with you.
And if you don't mind shouting out your socials one more
Yeah.
time so people can find you.
Yeah, Instagram, it's Nuge and Wood. Nuge is spelled Nuge, and TikTok is NVGE.
Awesome.
it.
Thank you, Nuge. It was awesome to get to meet you finally. I was
Definitely.
actually really excited because your work is beautiful, and it's something different. Like we had like artists come on that do painting and stuff, but yours is like the woodwork. I was excited to talk to you about the process. Very interesting, So thank you for being here. Maybe in the future, if you're willing, and then we can have you back and see where you're at, and catch up.
Yeah, that would be really cool to have an update and see where the journey is taking me, right?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thank
All
you
right,
so much. It's
guys.
an honor.
Thank you
Thank you.
so
It's an
much.
honor.
Thanks, Nuge.
See you guys
Appreciate
next
it.
week on the Color by Felix podcast.
Take care, everyone.